Are you, we don't have a talk scheduled yet for next month. If anybody wants to do one, feel free to. Let me know. We'll get you on the schedule. Otherwise, I just spent the last 3 days converting a PHP program into Perl. That was the first time I've ever done that before. So it was bad. I would say it was bad. But there were some interesting lessons that I learned out of it. So I thought that might make it an interesting talk. So that's probably what I'll do next month if nobody else comes up with one. I know that Tim is working on something, a talk that he wants to give. I don't know if he'll be ready or not. And so if anybody wanted to give a shorter talk, Tim's is a shorter talk as well. We could merge 2 short talks for next month. So anyway, and then Dave said we should do a social meeting at some point here because we haven't had one in forever. But I feel like we socialize at every one of these.
So. A lot, but who wants to stop?
Fun. So what would make a social meeting different from our normal meeting?
Nobody has to actually plan a talk. JT's off the hook. That's what's different.
But I'm probably going to be off the hook in July because as of right now, I'm not going to be in the country during MadMongers in July. So unless something changes, I'm going to be in Canada. So anyway, so unless something changes, you guys will have to have a social meting or skip it, or somebody else will have to give a talk.
We'll do something.
Anyway,
you should do a career fair meeting.
A career fair meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, because you want to hire people?
Yeah. More or less.
Actually, if anybody wants to move to Houston, I know of a company, a book company there that is hiring. It's $100 grand to start. You have to have massive skills. They asked me, but obviously I'm not interested. So anyway, so if anybody's looking for and interested in moving to Houston, that's the downside is you actually have to move there. So they want it in person. But
and apparently have massive skills.
Massive skills. You have to. Yeah,
I don't have that on my LinkedIn profile.
They're looking for top tier. That's how their description is: top tier Perl talent only. They're not willing to train anybody anything. They just want go step right in and do everything. So anyway.
Speaking of our lost sheep, how's Rob Heltz? Anyone talk to him?
I talked to him a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Did you end up hiring him?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm like, well, we got bought out, so we had this big org chart switch.
Oh, I didn't know you got bought out.
Yeah, we got bought. It was actually a really great thing because like we call it a creative merger as opposed to like a job killing merger. But,
okay.
So it was like whatever, keep doing what you're doing. I'm like, okay, great. But like that threw a big hiccup in my hiring. So he's supposed to get back to me, but I haven't heard from him in a couple of days. So
okay.
Hope his plane to go down in the Atlantic or something.
Yeah. No, I haven't talked to Rob since I switched him over to you, so that's been 3 months, 2 months, something like that. So anyway, without further ado, tonight's talk is about stupid CPAN tricks. For those of you who have been here for a while, you know that I do this like once or twice a year. Basically go over a bunch of CPAN modules that I've used recently because, as Dave mentioned, it's often hard to find good modules on CPAN unless you hear about them from somebody else. So, you know, since I do a lot of different kinds of apps and I work with lots of different CPAN modules all the time, I like to just share what I've found, and so that's what we're gonna do. So tonight, the first thing I thought would be interesting is how do I find stuff on CPAN? Because that's one of the things people are always like, how do you find anything? Because nothing ever matches what I'm looking for, right? It's interesting because we just had that conversation here a little bit ago, early on before everybody showed up. So obviously there's Search CPAN and Meta CPAN. These are both great sites that have good search engines. Meta CPAN has a little bit better search engine than Search.cpan, although I like the formatting on Search better than Meta. Anyway, the problem is that both of them are not very fuzzy about how they search. You have to type pretty much the terms that are in the document in order to get yourself a result back. So I don't actually use those unless I know specifically what I'm looking for. If I'm just kind of out and about, I actually do what everybody does for everything else. I just use Google, because Google, you can type in something that isn't directly the word, and it uses related adjectives and nouns and things like that, so that it can actually get a closer, or get a match, even if you're not using the exact word that they used. Maybe you said something like key, and it's looking for token or something like that. Google will actually find those differences, whereas Meta CPAN and Search CPAN won't find those, those terms that kind of mean the same thing, but not.
So can you just put site colon meta CPAN
Yes.
in the search box?
In the search box, and then you type your search term.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's handy.
yeah, and you can do that with any site. So it's useful for lots of things. Any site that you ever want to search, it's useful for. But specifically looking for Perl modules, it's very useful. And sometimes I don't even put in site meta CPAN. Sometimes I just type Perl and then whatever it is I'm looking for, or CPAN and then whatever it is I'm looking for, because those are specific enough terms that they will limit everything else.
I do that a lot too.
But it.
Do you find it's too fuzzy sometimes? I'm giving you results for PEARL.
Sometimes, but rarely.
Not like that, not for the language.
I've never
For the
heard
language
that
Perl,
problem.
it looks very smart about
Yeah.
that. They did change their syntax a while back. They don't do the plus thing anymore. You got to do quotes to like say
Yeah.
must. It's probably not good.
Yeah, but they've even fuzzified that sometimes. I don't like that. Yeah,
Specify what?
they'll drop a word here or there.
Oh
something.
yeah, and then it's
Oh,
like you got
yeah.
to click the thing to say no, I really
I
want
really
it.
want that word, yeah.
So anyway, that's how I find stuff. And the other thing is I don't give up easily, because I don't want to have to write stuff usually. So I'll try and type it in lots of different ways until I find the thing I'm looking for. I think, no, not this next module I'm going to talk about, but a couple modules in, there was one that I had a dandy time. It took me, I don't know, probably half a day to find the module I was looking to do, because I didn't know exactly what to search. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So the first module I want to talk about is crypt CBC. So have you ever needed to encrypt something but also be able to decrypt it afterwards? So not a one-way hash like a password, but you need to be able to store it encrypted. That's what crypt CBC is all about. So, and it's very, very simple. You basically, this is doing what's called a cipher block store. It's basically taking an encryption algorithm and then taking the individual pieces that you need to encrypt and putting it into a big string for you. So you give it a secret, and then you tell what cipher you want it to use. In this case, I'm using Blowfish, which is kind of the default one for this. Blowfish is also one of the strongest out there, so this is a great choice if you need to encrypt anything. And then to encrypt it, you just tell it, I want to encrypt this, and I get this blob back that I can store. So in this case, for example, if you had some kind of sensitive information like a social security number or a medical record or something like that, you just encrypt it, you shove it into your database, and then later on, if you need to get it back out, you can basically do the same thing. And the important bit here is that you have to keep your secret safe. Whatever the secret was that you encrypted it with, you need to keep that stored somewhere where nobody can get it and locked down, very, very secure. And if you want to do like military or government level encryption, that means that that secret cannot be on the same machine that the stuff is stored on. So you have to keep a completely separate network where you're going to request that the thing becomes unencrypted, and then it decrypts it on a separate server, and then it comes back, whatever.
Can I suggest one other thing?
Yeah.
If possible, to salt it.
Yes.
Okay, sorry if you covered that already.
I thought this auto salts, but
This does auto solve.
Yeah, it does.
So the one thing to know with crypt CBC is that the key that you provide, it does some magic behind the scenes for that to derive the actual key, the salt, and the initialization vector.
Oh, okay.
So they have different options where you can specify a literal key, an IV, and the salt. So this by itself will not be compatible with, if you wanted to maintain like cross compatibility between a module that does encryption versus using OpenSSL on the command line to decrypt or encrypt, then you need to use like a literal key setting within encrypt CBC in order to move all of that.
Yeah.
So CBC must with your key a little bit.
Yeah.
But
So
as long as you're just using CBC, you're fine.
As long as you're just using CBC, you're okay.
right. If you're encrypting it and decrypting it all yourself, you're good. It's like he was saying. If you want it to be portable, then you need to do that.
So you wouldn't stick like a primary key or something in front of the key to solve it? You saying that wouldn't help at all?
No.
Alright.
So anyway, recently PayPal, or not PayPal, I should say, recently the federal government contacted us and said, you need to start collecting social security numbers for everybody that you're paying dollars out to from the game crafter. Because we need to be able to tax all that money that you are giving them. And more importantly, if you pay them more than $10 a year, you have to do this. $10? Really? That's ridiculous. So anyway, we had to store people's social security numbers, which I was not happy about. But it's the federal government, I can't really say no. So I mean, we did end up fighting it, and I'll get into that in a minute. But
Is that
but
why you're
anyway.
going to Canada?
Unrelated.
Unrelated to Canada. Yes. So no, that's. But so we had to get everybody's social security numbers if they wanted to be paid out via PayPal. Turns out that later, through a negotiation with our accountant, they figured out that we didn't have to do this because PayPal is actually liable for that particular thing. So we don't have to. However, we didn't end up removing it from our software because we're adding additional payout gateways, and not all of them do that. So some of them we will have to collect the social security number in order to use those payouts. Like Braintree is the next one we're going to do, and that allows us to direct deposit stuff right into somebody's bank account. And because we're going directly to their bank account, we have to have their tax information. So what we did was we basically recommended that nobody use their social security number. Instead, they just get an EIN and use that stored in our system. But even so, we wanted to keep it all very, very encrypted. So we, encrypt CBC. It's all stored encrypted in the database. Database and the database and the secret are not on the same server, etc. So it's all pretty well encrypted at this point, even though we're not even recommending that people use the social security number.
So do you use like an ID or something that connects the encrypted data with the secret? So does everybody have a different secret, or is it just one secret for everybody?
Right now, we're just using one secret. However, we're looking at maybe doing a separate secret for each thing. The problem with that is then we have to set up a separate database, basically, because I don't want it on the same machine. So I don't want it in the same data store.
Right.
So that's why initially we're just going with one secret.
So I always wondered what people mean when they say they have their database separate from that key, because your application can access both the database and the key, so technically they're on the same.
What you do is you actually have a separate application that uses the key. So a web service, your app server grabs the data from the database, it's all encrypted, and then it passes the data to the web service and says decrypt this, and then it gives you back. The web service on another machine.
Okay.
So the two are separated.
Gotcha.
So that's what I mean by keeping
that's good clarification.
Yeah.
So do you just put that on one of those free servers out there that?
No. And the other thing about that is that particular machine that's got the key on it has no direct access to the database of any kind. So if somebody did break into that machine, it would have no way to get to the database. And vice versa, the database machine has no access to that machine. So they have to break two separate machines to be able to get the two pieces.
Or call your web service repeatedly.
So, okay. So that's that. So the next one is, DivX class filter column. Do anybody here use DivX class besides me? I don't know if it's a popular module or not. Okay. So DivX class is an ORM. It's a way to store data in the database that you don't have to muck around with the SQL unless you want to. I find it useful because it manages the whole schema for the database and everything for me, so upgrades are automatic and all that kind of stuff. One of the things is I wanted it to automatically encrypt and decrypt as the data comes in and out of the database. I didn't want to have to manually do that step, right? So I'm going to show a simple example. This isn't exactly what I'm doing because I have the web service part mixed in there, but I wanted to show you this because it's useful for anything. If you want, when you're pulling stuff out of DivX class or putting it into DivX class, if you want it to automatically do something for you, filter column is a great way to do that. So you have to load a component. This is in DivX class. This is how you load a plugin to DivX class. So this is loading the filter column plugin. Then we set up what column we want to filter and what we want to do to get it to and from storage. We're going to call these methods, or these are the method names that we're going to call. And then we set up our crypt just like we did before. And then we have the encrypt string method, right? And the decrypt string method. So that's it. So that way, now anytime I need to encrypt anything, or I'm dealing with this particular data, it's always going to be encrypted and decrypted automatically. So I don't have to worry about whether I'm screwing it up along the way if I forgot to do it one time or something like that. It's all automatic. So now when I just set that data, when I get it out of the database, it's already decrypted as far as my code is concerned. It's decrypted automatically, and then when I shove something into that field, when I hit the database, it automatically runs the code to encrypt it again and then shoves it into the store. So simple enough. So those two kind of go hand in hand. And, yeah, if you're using DivX class, this is a great module. I highly recommend it. So any questions, comments, scathing rebuttal?
Where do you initialize the cipher? Like literally just at the other users?
Oh, just, yeah, like I did here. This would be literally inlined in the module.
Okay, so this is the global implementing module.
Yes. Yeah, this would be in the class that's going to have the encrypted column.
So is it pretty robust? Like your encrypt or decrypt, or your to storage from storage could return like a hash ref or anything like that, or is it pretty?
Yeah, yeah. You could have it serialized to JSON or something and then come back out. There are better modules to do that if you want to do specifically JSON, but
if you wanted to generalize it,
yeah,
you could do that with it.
Yep.
How have you seen performance for, this is a bit tangential, but not so much. So the JSON and DJSON serialization versus something that's a little more native for that, like a Mongo or something. How are these in performance or scalability?
Well, I haven't done any scalability testing because I haven't had any problems. It's fast enough for my purposes.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, JSON's going to be slower than something like a freeze thaw kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's going to be.
I wouldn't
What's
be
that
so
module
sure.
called? But I forget what that module is called.
Storable.
Storable. Thank you. I haven't used it in so long that I forgot what it's called because I use JSON for everything. I just love JSON.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I haven't really done any testing on it because I've not run into any bottlenecks as far as I'm.
Have you benchmarked the two before?
Between JSON
and Storable?
No.
Okay, I suspect JSON might be really fast if you use the XS.
Yeah, I do. I always use
Yeah.
the XS module.
I know there's a binary storable out there that recently that's supposed to be really incredibly fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of talk lately too about what are those called? Google has a thing. There's a couple of them out there now that are binary serialization formats. There are libraries for them, and I can't remember the name of them, but they benchmark ridiculously fast.
Protobuf?
Yeah. Wait, no.
Protocol buffers?
Yes, protocol buffers.
It's like you declare the field up front and then it's like all TSV.
Right. Yeah. And those things are ridiculously fast.
But but you have to have a schema that is like compatible, and
Yeah.
there's an investment up front.
But if that's what you're concerned about, if performance is your thing, then in my case, you know, it's relatively inexpensive to just get a different server if you needed it a little faster.
Yeah. Well, in the past I played with like XPath, like storing as XML and using XPath.
Storing as XML?
Well, I know it seems horrible, but like Postgres now has native JSON support, so you could treat Postgres just like Mongo.
Okay.
But long before that, MySQL had you could, if you stored XML in the column, you could use the XPath function to say, I want to go, you know, so far deep into the thing and retrieve. So I'm actually pretty good at XPath now.
Okay.
It's semi-decent, but it's all so much slower than using something native. And but that was like years ago that I played with it, so I don't know how it compares now. But I mean, if you're
I haven't
doing,
used
like,
I haven't used Mongo in production for anything either, so I
don't do it. Mongo is dev null. Don't do it.
I'm just saying I wouldn't have anything to compare it to is what I'm getting at. So all of the NoSQL databases that I use for anything are supplemental. I always use MySQL first. Like all the data goes into there because I know I can reliably store it, back it up, restore it, you know, all that stuff. And then I create separate caches in all these other data types, or store types, because those I treat as volatile.
There's a whole talk in there.
Yeah. So anyway, that's yeah. So I don't really have anything to compare it to because Mongo I haven't used.
Well, like how many? I guess what I'm gonna ask, so these are like sort of incidental requests that are coming through, or like
For what?
for your experience with the DivX class.
No, everything I do is in DivX class.
Yeah, well, and specifically like the serialization, deserialization, like, I mean, on something like an Amazon small server, like, have you hit load issues with that, or like, where would you see?
I haven't hit any load issues with that. I mean, we're not talking like I have huge numbers like you either, though. You're talking about.
Oh, there are not many requests, just long.
So mine, you know, I got 40,000 users or whatever, but they're not all active simultaneously. You're only talking, 500 at a time are active.
Well, that's
something like that.
considerable.
So I don't think it's that considerable, but I run those on small servers, and
so you'd have like 500 concurrent users on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's,
I mean, it's
neat, that.
yeah, it's yeah. Most of the app servers for that are small. Now I do have template toolkit has actually been slow lately, and that's the thing I've been benchmarking. So I actually moved up to a medium server for the thing that renders the templates because it's very slow. Especially the more data you put into template toolkit, the worse it gets. So, and we put a lot in there. So we've been. I was looking at switching out template toolkit to something faster like XSlate, but instead we're basically just moving everything to web services and populating via AJAX requests. So we load in just the minuscule amount that you need to render a page with some tiny amount of data, and then all the rest fills in via AJAX. So it's been easier to solve the problem than changing all those templates to XSlate. So anyway, okay. So the next thing is DivX class helper results random. Result set, I should say, random. So if you have, you can just use rand, for example, if you're using MySQL rand, parentheses, sort by or order by rand. You can do that in MySQL, and I know Postgres has a rand function too. I forget what the syntax for it is though. But anyway, most databases have a way of sorting something by a random sequence, right? Result set. But they don't implement them all the same way. They're all a little bit different how they do it. So if you want it to be database neutral, you can use this, and it basically works the same way as the other one. We load in a component. They're just loading in a plugin here, and then we say we want a random user. So we call our schema, get our result set of users. We say rand, and we just want a single one of them back. Boom. Now it's a very DivX class way of getting a random user back. Now you can do this via a regular search thing too. So like your order by clause, I didn't actually put this on the screen, but here, let me put it in here quick.
Laptop, your screen's so small.
Oh, bigger screen on a bigger laptop.
No.
I think it's bigger.
It's like 2 months after they hired me, the retinas came in.
Okay, so let's try that again. So this, if you were using MySQL, is, oh, and I forgot this, I forgot the brace to end it. Okay.
Slide doesn't compile, JT.
My slide doesn't compile. It's terrible. Okay, so
If you're using the any slideshow thing, you could compile your slides.
if I was using what?
The thing I used to give my presentation was
Room.
Oh, it was,
Vroom,
yeah,
yeah.
Vroom, yeah. So, no. Anyway, if I wanted to get a random user and I was just going the MySQL way essentially, I could do the same thing by doing search undef just because I have no where clause in this particular thing, and then order by, and if you do a reference to a string, it just treats it as a literal. It'll just turn that into raw SQL at that point and insert it in to that space. So basically I'm ordering by rand parentheses. So anyway, so that's another way to do the same thing, but you can see that if you're doing a lot of random stuff, the one up above using results at random is just nicer looking. You know, it's obvious what it's doing, and it can be cross-platform. So, you know.
Is it driver based? Does it figure out what kind of?
Yeah, I know. I haven't tested it with anything other than MySQL, but supposedly it will load for it. I saw specifically in the module it mentioned Postgres and MySQL. So whether it works for Oracle or anything else, I don't know, but theoretically it could. So yeah, I don't know if it's loading a separate driver for each one or if it's just got hard-coded strings. You know, like it knows what Postgres is or does MySQL, I don't know, but it supposedly works multi-database. So it works for me, that's all that I care about. Anyway, so that's two different ways to do the same thing, but this is, like I said, a little cleaner way of doing it. So anyway, any questions, comments, or scathing rebuttal on that? Moving on. Okay, so this is the module. Wait, I should back up. This is the module that took me half a day searching to try and find. So the problem is this. At the Game Crafter, we take in everybody's addresses and we ship to every country in the world. And because of that, we deal with lots of different character sets, right? Everything in the Game Crafter is UTF-8, so it's no big deal. However, our shipping company does not do UTF-8. Their address system doesn't handle UTF-8. It has to be all ASCII. And most importantly, it has to be the subset of ASCII that doesn't even have accented characters in it. So it has to be, instead of A with a or it's called an accent on top, or U with an umlaut on top, or any of those kind of things. It couldn't even be that. It just has to be A or U, right? So it's not just a matter of they don't support UTF-8, they also just support a very small subset of ASCII. So I was trying to figure out, well, how am I going to convert that stuff that my users are typing in their native whatever to text, just basic ASCII. And I typed in everything I could think of, UTF-8, and I'm like, convert accent into plain, and like, just trying to figure out what to type, and I just couldn't get anywhere. And eventually, I stumbled into a module that linked to this module. I got so desperate that I actually started reading the modules themselves, like reading the documentation, not just going based on the search results, but then when I get to it, if it did anything that even seemed like maybe somewhere in it, it might have a function that would do something that I wanted. So I started reading them, and eventually I read through enough of them where I found one that linked to this module, or actually linked to a module that then linked to this module, I should say. So this one is the best one out of the ones that I found that could do this. It's called Text Unicode. And don't let the name fool you. It doesn't have to be Unicode characters that you're converting here. It can just be an ASCII with, you know, the A with the accent on it or something. It doesn't have to actually be like a Cyrillic character, or a Chinese Mandarin character, or something like that. It can just be ASCII like this. So I have an A with the accent, and I need to turn that into A. So that's it. Just Unicode, and it does it. But it can get way fancier than that. You know, if you have like that, it'll turn it into AE, which is kind of cool.
That is really cool.
And if you have a half, it'll turn it into 1/2, which is pretty freaking sweet, right?
Any idea how this works?
I didn't look behind the scenes how it
Just a big table.
Maybe. I don't care. It works.
There are some Unicode notations on letters about what they are and what they would translate into.
Okay.
But I don't think that's sufficient.
I was going to say, I'm going to guess that this is using something way smarter than a table because of the examples I'm about to show you.
Yeah, cool.
So, okay, this is the last simple example now. TM.
So at this point, you're thinking it's just some like hash up at the top.
Right, because that's what the
Very
modules I found were. I found several modules that will convert certain characters, but in their caveats section, they're like,
Okay.
this won't convert. This particular example
Right.
will not convert. Right?
It's just enough to get them by with whatever they have.
Exactly. Exactly.
They cannot-
Until I found this thing, and I was like, yeah! So, here we go.
OCR or something.
Yep.
What?
Wow. Huh?
What?
How cool is that?
That's totally cool. How did they
That
do
is
that?
amazing.
They'll take the Unicode symbols even and
What?
convert it for you.
How are they?
So,
That's magic.
it is magic, and I friggin' love it. I don't know who wrote this module, but I need to buy them an entire barrel of beer because it is so cool. So, anyway, I couldn't believe it when I saw that it was doing this. But yes,
What?
if
That's
you
like
run
a
into
translation.
yeah,
How did?
if you run into a problem where you need to convert UTF-8 or a larger subset of ASCII down to basic ASCII, there is nothing better than this module that I found.
All right, so I have a very related but inverse thing that I had to do today.
Yeah.
So we're doing like text processing as it comes in, and we have to figure out an escape character because we can't do tabs.
Mhm.
And the way I have been doing it also was just the naive, like one day I'm like, whatever, pipe.
Mhm.
Well, I did that because pipe you're not really supposed to have an URI. Like it's not, but people do it all the time, and so things are disparsed. So I'm like, all right, finally today we're gonna do this right. We're gonna have a character, because we can do UTF-8, so we're gonna pick a character. And I almost found my chair laughing so hard on the W3 School site, looking at all the like wingdings and miscellaneous ones.
Yes.
Because the whole time I'm just like envisioning a customer sitting and seeing like why their message didn't parse correctly. And there has to be a little symbol in there. And so like we just went with a boring old little like white block to represent tab. But I'm like, what kind of Easter egg can I put in here at this point? Because there's like skull and crossbones,
Yeah.
like biohazard. But my favorite was astronomical sign for Uranus. Because I'm just imagining the support call where like, yeah, what is this symbol? And then the poor schmuck on the other end of the phone has to say astronomical sign.
There's a lot of crazy stuff in there. Too.
I spent
Did you see any of the
a
color
solid
ones?
20 minutes reading through them.
Did you see the full color ones?
No.
There are full color
What are
Unicode
those?
characters. There's I don't know if you search a site for Unicode table, you can actually search. And
There's
Yeah.
well, I think the color piece of the Unicode is actually based on the implementation of the font that can. So if you use Homebrew on Mac, they actually print a beer mug for every command that they run, and that's basically a Unicode server.
Nice. Yeah.
Anyways. Sorry, that was my little bit of mirth for the day. Was trying to.
I was surprised at how few of the browsers actually fully support Unicode.
Yeah, there's a lot of like a lot of the symbols are just like in that channel.
Yeah, I started using some Unicode characters just as icons in some of my sites, and then I found as I was testing that like it just didn't show up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? This is just Unicode. What is that? And I wasn't using anything like fancy. It was just like bullet symbols and things like that. Just
It's often the font of your
the font,
font
plus the browser.
yeah. Well, anyway.
He's just got a big table on it.
Is it really?
Uh-huh.
Holy crap!
It's
It must be an enormous
every
table.
second. Yeah, they're all different modules.
Yep.
Wait, what?
I don't
So
get
there's all different submodules for each grouping.
Yeah.
So we run into this at work because people are cutting and pasting off of PDFs.
Oh, right.
There's probably
And
not
so,
many generated.
who knows what character is coming from? You know, the original author meant it to be a hyphen.
There's no way to
The user looks at it and thinks it's a hyphen.
Uh-huh.
Who
It's
knows
not.
what it is?
Yeah.
So
Could be
there-
anything.
there- on a related note, so we have at work we have lots of people who use Excel and Outlook for a whole bunch of stuff, and plenty of times Word has this weird stuff of converting a hyphen to like an N dash or or two dashes to
A double dash.
a double dash or whatnot.
Email people command lines that never work.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So there's a module called text demoralizer.
Demoralizer.
Moron.
Because it's moron quotes.
Yeah, moron.
Demoralizer. I like demoralizer better.
Yeah. that takes all those special word conversions and converts them back to what they're actually supposed to be.
I think using Excel is more.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this was my fun one. I
Yeah.
I felt so justified spending a day or half a day finding it just because it's so cool. So well, anyway.
I'm sure they would be happy if somebody wanted to add to their collection too, because according to the notes, it's limited by the author's talent.
I haven't found anything that it doesn't do yet.
Who is the author, and do they keep it up to date all the time? Because I'm wondering if that would be the hardest thing. People are adding stuff. What?
S-Burke, S-B-U-R-K-E. The author.
Thank you, S. Bird.
Yes.
And interns.
Okay. So another module I've been using a lot lately. I know in past talks I've given a lot of talks about image magic. I used image magic for everything. But lately I've been converting everything I'm doing image magic to Imager, which is a pure Perl. Well, it's not pure Perl. There's a lot of C code in it too, but it's Perl only. This isn't like a hack or an access layer over a bunch of C code that exists for everything. This was built by Perlers for Perlers. And it can do almost everything ImageMagick can do, and more importantly, it has a much more sane API.
That's nice.
And what's that?
I said that's nice.
Yes. And it's, although they still do some kind of old school Perlish things, like they return an error string rather than having exceptions and things like that. So there's some stuff that's old school, but for the most part, it's much, much better. And the big thing that's better is that it is 10 times faster than ImageMagick. And that's in the slowest test case. I've had it as fast as 20 times faster in some of the test cases that I've done. So it just depends on what it is you're processing, what level of fastness you're going to get out of it, but it's always, in every case, faster than ImageMagick. So anyway, here's how it works, very simply. So if you want to create a new image, you just give it a size. You say it needs to be this pixels by this pixels, right? And then if you want to, let's say I want to pick up another image and use it as a background image, or somehow composite it onto this image I just created. In this case, I'm doing it as a background, but you could, literally paste them in anywhere you want. You just read in that image, and then there's my error string that I was just talking about, and then I compose it onto the other image that I just did. And then, if I want to draw a polygon, I just give it the points where I want it to draw and the color I want it to draw in. It's no brainer or no big deal, very easy. And the thing that's nice about this is that I'm actually working with Perl data structures. With ImageMagick, you have to pass it a string that represents the set of points, which is very, very much a pain in the ass. So anyway, and you can do other things. There's all kinds of shapes like circles and whatever. The one thing I haven't found, or that it doesn't have, is an ellipse, a way to draw an ellipse of any kind. So what you have to do is draw a circle and then you skew it.
Yep.
So that's the one thing that ImageMagick can do that it can't do that I've found so far. Otherwise, it can do everything. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are a lot of conversion things that ImageMagick can do, because ImageMagick can read something like, I don't know, 70 formats of images or something, and then as long as you have all the plugins installed, and then it'll, you know, you can read and write all these different types. Whereas Imager can only read, I think, like 4 types or something. I think it's BMP, PNG, JPEG, and GIF, I think, are the ones that it does. So the ones that most people would use, basically. But it won't do, you know, all these other pretty, like ImageMagick will read Photoshop format, and this will not read that, you know, that sort of thing. ImageMagick will read PDFs and write PDFs. This will not do that. So anyway, there's that, and there is a plug-in mechanism. So if you did need some other format, you could plug in that other format. Because by default, this doesn't read and write PNGs either. You have to install Imager PNG to make it do that. So anyway, so that's that. And I should point out, 10 times faster than ImageMagick. I already did that, but it's really freaking fast. The other thing that's nice is that I had to write a bunch of code when I wanted to put some text into ImageMagick. You can put text into either of these very, very simply. But if you want that text to wrap as it's going on your image, with ImageMagick, I actually had to write some code that would figure out how big the font was and then cut the characters at a specific thing so that it would keep wrapping it, essentially. Yes. And that is a lot of pain in the ass, right? So this thing has this thing called Imager Font Wrap. Oh, so nice. And it's very simple too. So again, you have your image, so that's the size that it's working with. You define a font that you want to use, and you can use any OpenType or TrueType font, just like with ImageMagick. Then you know, with your font, you'll assign different things like how big is it in pixels and what color is it and that sort of thing. And then you say, you know, here's my big block of text, and this is how I apply that text to it. Imager font wrap text, what color? This is overriding the color that was defined in the font. I just wanted to show that you can override it. You don't have to use the default. AA means, do I want to anti-alias the font when I'm applying it? The image is the image that I want to apply the font to. The font is the font definition we have up here, the string of text. Where am I starting the text, XY coordinates, and how wide do I want it to be? Like, do I want to do the entire width of the image, or do I want to just do a little portion of the image, that sort of thing? And then whatever justification I want for that text.
So why did they do this as a function instead of a method?
Because this is not part of Imager. This is outside of Imager. It's a utility. So yeah, that's why it's its own separate module that isn't part of Imager. So anyway, but it's still there.
Yeah,
that's the key. It's there. You don't have to do anything. It just works, and it works better than the code that I wrote, of course, because I didn't put enough time into the code I wrote. You know, like this thing actually, it does a very good job with figuring out how big the font is and all that kind of stuff. Like for the thing that I wrote, I did it just so it worked with the one font I was working with, right? So every time I needed to do something, I would have to rejigger that stuff to make it work. This, it's actually dynamically calculating it based on the size of the font that you're inputting here, so, and the characteristics of that font. So that's really cool. Now, if you get some crazy fonts, it won't do it quite right, so you'll have to still tweak it a little bit with like your width numbers and stuff. But it's very, very close, and it'll get you, you know, within seconds, you're able to get to where you want it to be. So anyway, I just thought that was super cool. So, any questions on that? Anybody do image work at all besides me? A little bit?
I did a while ago.
I've been playing around with SVG lately.
Awesome. I've been meaning to get into SVG. It's really cool, but I haven't. Yeah, I create SVGs in Illustrator, but I haven't done anything with programming that. So, what module are you using?
I think it's just SVG. I think,
Oh, there's an SVG module?
I think it's maintained by Gabor right now.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it was written by him, but
No.
it's
It works well? And
It seems
can you
to.
use it to like,
I'm just doing basic stuff. I'm just playing
just
around
drawing
with it.
polygons and stuff?
Yeah.
Does it have stuff for like animation or anything? Or
No, I was trying to figure out how to do that. And I think you just have to write your ECMA script or. I think it's,
I haven't done anything, so I have no idea. But that's cool. Okay. So the next one is Perl S3. So over the last couple of years, there's been a renaissance of HTTP libraries within Perl. It used to be LWP was it, right? And now lately HTTP Tiny came on the scene, and now there's Perl, which is using curl underneath to be really fast. I think Perl is currently the leader as far as performance goes, and then there's a couple other ones that I'm forgetting.
So Perl just shells out to curl?
I think so, yeah. Either that or it's using an XS layer to access the curl library.
Client.
What's that? What did you say, Dave?
S3 client.
S3 client?
Whatever that means.
You're saying that's what Perl S3 is using?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm talking about Perl separately, the actual Perl module.
Okay.
But anyway, Perl S3.
Okay. I see.
The reason I wanted to talk about this, there's lots of S3 clients that you can get that are Perl libraries, and I use several of them.
Yeah, Net Amazon S3 just use LWP underneath.
Right, exactly. There's several of them you can use, but this one has a specific feature that I really liked. First, let's just go through, this is how you access something. You have everything you do with S3, you need to give it this information. That's your login, essentially. And this is create object is basically put a file up into the S3. S3, by the way, if you aren't familiar with it, is a simple storage service by Amazon. It's basically like a modern version of FTP. It's a place to store a bunch of files that you can then access from anywhere because it's all web enabled and a series of web services to upload it. So it's basically just a big bucket where you can dump stuff. Bucket is equivalent of a folder. It's not quite the same, but it's kind of similar. And a file is the object that you're storing. So I just called my bucket, my folder bucket, and I called my file. You would obviously call them something else. Then you pass it in a Perl file handle, and any metadata that you want to attach to it, as far as access parameters or HTTP headers that should be returned, that sort of thing. Do you have a question? No. And then if you want to delete an object, you go there. So all of the various S3 modules do this kind of basic functionality. You can create and delete buckets, you can list them, you can list files, you can delete files, you can create files.
Does it have the option to be able to set encryption on it?
I don't know.
I had to hack that onto Net Amazon S3.
Somebody look that up. Like, I don't know. I don't use it.
It's a custom header like that. So if
Yeah,
you set a custom header.
If you can set custom header, or if all it is setting a custom header, then
Yeah.
absolutely you can do that.
Oh, nice.
So I thought it was something you had to do before it.
No, it's an ex-Amazon.
Okay. Then yes, absolutely.
Encryption or whatever. And
Yeah.
It just checks the box that you want it stored encrypted.
Okay,
Which is nonsense, but
that's cool. Then yes, it absolutely can do that. So without any dicking around, you can literally put anything you want in there.
that's really handy.
Now, whether or not Amazon will accept those things when you put them in there is a different story, because it has certain things like, I've noticed certain content types it won't take.
Yeah, it's got a whole list of return codes.
Right. So you can put anything you want in there, whether or not Amazon accepts it, that's a different story. But yes, if there's a flag for encrypting stuff stored, then it'll do that.
Oh, does it obey environment variables for proxy?
I think this one does. I don't use those, but I'm pretty sure I saw that, didn't I? So I can't say for sure because I don't use the proxy. But getting to the thing that I thought was really cool about this module is that, going back, we have our access key. You can copy an object from one bucket to another bucket within your Amazon S3 store without bringing it back down to you. Most of the other modules, you can download it to you and then re-upload it to somewhere else, but this will literally copy it within Amazon without ever bringing it down to you. And that's huge.
API call?
Yeah.
Particularly big.
Yeah, exactly. Because here's the thing I use it for. At the Game Crafter, we have files that are, most of the files are private. Nobody else other than the owner can access them. But sometimes the owner wants to be able to let people access them after they've purchased some content, right? So they buy the game, and now they'll get access to this extra bonus downloadable content. So what they do, or what we do, is basically when the user has purchased the game, they'll have a link on there that they can click on. When they click on it, I make a quick call out to S3 and say, copy this object to a public place. Then they're allowed to download it for the next 10 minutes, and then I delete it from that place. Right? So it's basically keeping the file private, so just in case they shared the URL with anybody, that URL is only good for 10 minutes. Right? And I could change the time on that, whatever. I just have a cron job that basically runs and deletes the thing after X amount of time. But the cool thing here is that I was able to, because I'm not bringing it down to my server and pushing it back up, because it's copying within Amazon, I can do it instantly. So that enables me to not have to do a lot of fancy stuff as far as making these public things, or these private things public. So I thought that was super cool, because everything else I was looking at before that was bringing the damn file down. And some of these files are several hundred megabytes, so there's some time there. And bandwidth. Well, no, bandwidth would be free because the server is within Amazon. So if you, any copying to or from S3 from servers within Amazon are free, as long as you're in the same region. So anyway, that was, but the fact that I can copy a 100 megabyte file like that, that's a huge deal. So this is the only module I found on CPAN that can do this. So that's pretty sweet. Anybody work with S3 besides me? You do? I do that. You do everything Amazon. You do more Amazon than I do. So, okay. So, following down that path of other modules that that have been coming out lately for web. So there's HTTP Tiny, which is really cool. It comes with Perl these days. So if you get a new Perl install, you'll have HTTP Tiny, which is great if you want to do something very, very basic with HTTP. But most of the time you want to do something more than something just basic. You want to be able to do anything LWP can do, right? And most of what you want LWP to do is to not be LWP, but rather to be able to work with HTTP response, or request and response. HTTP request and response are the cool parts of LWP, not all the other crap, right? Or cookie jar, perhaps. That might be another thing you want to do. Well, HTTP Thin basically gives you the ability to work with those couple of modules using HTTP Tiny. So you get the speed benefit of HTTP Tiny and the relative size. You're not using up so much memory because LWP is ginormous. But you get the size and speed of HTTP Tiny, but you get to use request and response and cookie jar and things like that without having all of LWP loaded. So like this, I'm using request common here just because it's easier to generate the requests using request common. Everybody familiar with request common? So request common will actually generate the request object for you, HTTP request object for you, without having to manually fill out all the little fields one at a time. So you create a new user agent, like that, just like you would with LWP. And right here, you could pass in HTTP cookie jar, for example, if you wanted it to keep track of cookies. So then you get to do a request response cycle that looks very much like LWP. So get right there is actually a subroutine that's exported by HTTP request common. So it creates a get request for me, or a get request object by just passing the URL into it. So it's very, very simple to create those objects using HTTP request common. So I really like that module a lot. And you can do the same thing with a post as well. So in this case, I'm passing in post, the URL. I'm passing in, you can put in a list of HTTP headers that you want to have there. And then ultimately, that content right there is actually going to what's it called? Form control. It's basically going to turn all these into form parameters that you're posting up. So it'll create a body section for you in the post that it'll turn this hash reference into a body segment when it posts. So it's not going to be posted along the URL like a GET request would. It'll actually work like a post body. So you don't have to convert all that crap for it. Anyway, just three little lines there are really, I would put it on one line usually. I can post somewhere, or I can create a fairly complicated HTTP request object very, very simply using HTTP request conf. And then, again, you just do your request and HTTP thin does the rest, and it's all good.
This is only for complex request objects, right? They're not really, these will work just the way, without using HTTP thin, you can just use HTTP tiny and do all the same things that you have up on the side.
I don't think so, no. Because HTTP thin, or HTTP tiny, man, it's been about a year since I had this conversation, but HTTP tiny doesn't work with HTTP request and response, or if it does, it's some hard thing. I was having a conversation with, I don't remember who, or maybe I was, who's running YAPC next year? Can't remember his name right off the top of my head. Anyway, I was having a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about, if we just created this nice thin little wrapper over HTTP tiny, all of a sudden we could use the whole universe of objects from LWP. Because it wasn't easy from HTTP tiny, it's not easy to use it. So this thin little wrapper basically just gives you an interface that all of a sudden makes the LWP stuff just work. So you technically could use it probably without thin. It's just that you're going to have to jury rig the stuff that thin jury rigs. So does that make sense?
But I've used HTTP tiny, but I'm not doing anything complicated. It's just a bunch of
if you're just doing like a GET request.
GET requests and some posts out that posts raw JSON to like a web service.
Yeah.
And that works just fine without having to create a request object as such. So you just use HTTP tiny, right? So
yeah, it's absolutely true. It becomes more complicated when you want to do this sort of stuff. If you want to create the post body out of this, that's the big thing.
Like 206 chunking.
What's that?
206 chunking.
Yes.
Complicated responses, especially trying to do like roll your own comment or something.
And I think it also makes migrating from LWP or migrating off of LWP. Most of the responses are already HTTP request or responses, so you just plug it into HTTP thin, I guess.
And that's why I liked it, because I had a bunch of modules that were using LWP, and I got an automatic performance increase by simply switching them to thin. And I didn't really have to change much in the way of code, just my constructor essentially.
Right.
So that was it. And I still got to keep using cookie jar. That's another thing that I use a lot. And like doing that out of just HTTP thin or HTTP tiny is hard. So anyway, so that was, I just was like, this is a no-brainer, like 5-minute thing that I can do and get better performance. So why wouldn't I do that? So anyway, so that's another little module. The only downside is HTTP tiny, like you said, it's with Perl right off the bat. As long as you don't need anything complicated, that's better because you don't have to actually even use CPAN to get to it.
Right.
This thing is only on CPAN, it doesn't come with Perl, so you got that. And like I said, faster and smaller than LWP. So, so that's basically it for the modules that I wanted to show you guys tonight. I was hoping that some of you would have some modules that you wanted to talk about. I know that Jesse actually recently posted his second module ever to CPAN, so maybe you want to say a couple words about that in case somebody's interested in it.
It's Office 365 EWS client. It's basically a wrapper or an extension of EWS client that wraps in the Exchange 2010 R2 Wisdom that ships with Office 365. So it's pretty simple, but I think other people will find it useful. So I don't know, that's about it. I mean, you can bring it up there. It uses Moose roles, so that's kind of my first foray into the Moose world, and I figured out how to extend a Moose role, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, roles are awesome.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of Moo lately.
Yeah, I use that too.
I've been finding that I like it better than Moose, and not because of the speed difference, which is what you'd think you'd want it for. I actually like it better because of how it does types. So in Moose, you actually, and you can do this in Moose as well, but it's not the default. In Moose, by default, you set a type, like this is a str, this is a string, this is an num, a num. That's what it is. So and you can set up different kinds of validation on fields to do whatever you want. You can configure it however you want. But in Moo, you always just pass a subref to it. So whatever you want to do your validation is just a subref, always. And that's just simpler to me because most of the time I want to do one-off validation. So I don't want to set up something in advance to be used later. I just want to do it right there. Plus, if I do want to reuse it, I'll just make it an anonymous subroutine that's stored in a scalar and just plop that in 10 times or whatever I want. So it's just, I don't know, I just like it. It's simpler, it's faster. And I also like that it's consistent with its default values. You always pass a subref as a default value as well. Whereas in Moose, you can do either a scalar or a subset. So I just like that it's more consistent. It's always the same thing every time. So, and then of course you can still upgrade to Moose if you want later.
So when we did the talk on the command line frameworks, was it app command?
App command, yeah.
I found another one called MooseX command.
MooseX command?
Yeah.
Okay.
That I think it basically
integrates it with
Moose. So you can use Moose to actually build your subcommands and its own options and whatnot, which I thought was pretty interesting because I haven't used Moose much before, but probably much faster to get up and running than app command.
I'm sure it would be.
You don't have to write your modules and your commands from scratch.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. One of my devs, in fact it might have been Dave, I don't remember, it was either you or Colin, pointed out that after I'd already written the thing with app command, they're like, here, MooseX command. I'm like, damn it! So, but at that point I was like, I'm not rewriting this, it's already done, it's working.
Well, the neat thing about using the Moose version too is you can use roles to like share options across apps. So you write an option once as a role, and then every app that needs it just uses the role.
So it was you that pointed it out then?
Yeah. and you specifically said that was something you were looking for because you had to duplicate that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was too late.
Why weren't you in my head before I started?
I've been trying to stay out of your head for a long time.
That's probably smart.
I did a minor web app for work this last about month, I guess, to wrap it up now. And unlike anything I've done before, I did the entire data model is just in the XML files that I have to output. So normally I just like go to MySQL or Postgres or something for any of that and work around that. But this time I because it also be version controlled in Git, so I looked at like a number of Git modules and they were all like really annoying. So I ended up just shelling out for Git commands, and I'm like, you know what? It's sad, but this is actually way easier to just call the Git command because I know exactly what's going on. I don't need to mess with the trees or any of that. So it was really stupid for that. But since I was the thing I was trying to avoid was having ideas that were in ORM not be the be the same as the artifact that was getting spat out by all the validation that occurred in the web apps. Like, someone would go and say, okay, I want to put in a new record. Then, like, at the end, it has to go out into this XML file that goes out and does the data processing. So, like, last year, if I'd been